Welcome to Sleepy History Stories, where the past helps you unwind. Tonight, we're stepping inside a Viking longhouse, deep in winter. Snow falls outside, fire crackles inside. Life is rough, but the warmth of the hearth and the rhythm of daily survival will ease you into rest. As the flames flicker and the stories begin, tell us in the comments, what time are you watching, and where in the world are you tuning in from? Now, wrap yourself in furs, listen close, and drift with us, back to a winter long ago. Imagine waking up in the dim half-light of a snow-choked morning. You're inside a Viking longhouse. The air is thick with the scent of woodsmoke, dried fish, and damp wool. The thatched roof sags with frost, and the walls of turf and timber creak softly in the cold. There's no window to peek outside, only slits that let in more chill than light. You're not in a castle, not in a warrior's hall. You're a farmer, a fisherman, one of the many whose life was ruled by weather, hunger, and hard labor. Your bedding is straw, and it's damp. A rough woolen blanket barely keeps out the cold. Your breath fogs in front of you. You pull on coarse, scratchy tunics and layered wool leggings. You haven't truly been warm in weeks. Outside, the wind howls across the fjord. Snow has drifted up the side of the longhouse. It's not unusual. Winter here means darkness stretches for most of the day. Just a few pale hours of light before the long night returns. The livestock are huddled in with you, not for convenience, but necessity. Goats, chickens, maybe a cow. Their heat helps you survive. Your first task is to stoke the central hearth. The fire never goes out. It can't. It's the only warmth, the only way to cook, the only thing standing between your family and frostbite. The embers are buried in ash to preserve them overnight. You blow gently, fingers numb, coaxing life back into the flames. Breakfast is simple. Flatbread from barley or rye. Maybe some smoked fish if you're lucky. Dried berries, roots stored in the cool dark. Fresh food is scarce. Hunting is unreliable in deep winter. The last catch was weeks ago. The dried cod hanging from the beams overhead rattles in the draft like old bones. You spend the day gathering wood, checking the animals, mending tools, all with hands calloused and red from cold. The snow never lets up. Your boots are worn, stitched from hides. Every step outside is a slow battle against frozen ground. The longhouse is dark, even at midday. Oil lamps sputter and smoke. You sit near the fire when possible, but space is shared. Children, elders, animals, all huddle close. You hear stories passed down, told in low voices over the crackle of fire. Myths of gods and monsters, sea voyages and ancestors, meant to fill the silence of endless snow. There is no privacy, no warmth beyond the fire, no rest beyond necessity, just a rhythm of survival. Feed, mend, gather, endure. And outside, the snow keeps falling. Now, let's step away from the daily life of the common folk and into the footsteps of one infamous man, a Viking known not for survival, but for exile, rage, and exploration. Eric Thorvaldsson. You may know him better as Eric the Red. Born in the rugged fjords of Norway, Eric carried the legacy of stubborn independence from a young age. His family was no stranger to trouble. His father, Thorvald Asfoldsson, was exiled from Norway for committing manslaughter. And so, like many Norse families seeking a second chance, they sailed west to Iceland, where the land was hard but free. but the shadow of blood followed them. Eric, too, would find himself at odds with the law. A neighborly dispute over land and property escalated into violence. Eric killed. He was banished from his new home, not for a short time, but for 3 long years. And so he set sail once again, this time into the unknown. Drifting through the icy sea, Eric came upon a stark, vast island, frozen, wind-swept, but untouched. He would call it Greenland, a name chosen with calculated hope, to lure future settlers to this desolate place with dreams of fertile pastures. Imagine him on the deck of his ship, a dragon-proud Nair, the sails stiff with frost, the waves dark and laced with foam. Behind him, nothing but memory. Ahead, a world he would shape with his own hands. For 3 years, he explored and settled parts of the island, building homes of turf and timber, learning the land, though it was merciless. When his exile ended, he returned to Iceland to convince others to join him, and somehow they did. Hundreds followed him to Greenland, seeking new beginnings, freedom, and land. And Eric became the quiet chieftain of this strange, ice-crusted frontier. He was known for his strength, yes, but also for his silence. His story is not one of great speeches or public victories. It's a tale whispered by wind and sea, a man shaped more by the cold than by conquest. But tragedy marked him, too. One of his sons, Leif Erikson, would go on to be the first European to reach North America, a quiet footnote in Eric's legacy. And when Eric grew older, a fall from a horse, perhaps seen as an omen, kept him from joining that final expedition. Eric the Red died in Greenland, a land of snow, hardship, and frozen dreams. His saga, like many Norse lives, ends not with a roar, but with the wind howling through empty fjords. As you rest deeper into this journey, let us now turn to something quieter, something less visible than battles and boats, the inner life of the Viking mind. The Norse world was not only one of axes and wind-whipped sails, it was also rich in symbolism, superstition, and rituals, a spiritual rhythm woven into the cracks of daily life. Imagine a dark wooden stave church, its roof pitched sharply toward the sky, dragon heads carved into the beams, rising against the mist of a pine forest. Inside, there is no grand sermon, no chanting crowds, just the hushed flicker of a torch against stone, a quiet, ancestral weight in the air. The Vikings believed their world was threaded together by great, unseen forces, the Norns who wove fate, the gods who walked among men, and the 9 realms resting on the branches of Yggdrasil, the great tree of life. They did not write books. Instead, they carved runes, strange, angular letters etched into wood, stone, and bone. These were not just letters, but spells in themselves. Each stroke carried weight, a carved prayer for protection, a message to the gods, a memory made permanent in iron or ash. The dead were honored with care and with silence. A chieftain might be buried in a ship, his body surrounded by treasured items, weapons, jewelry, tools, even animals. Imagine the solemn procession, furs pulled tight against the cold, the boat resting in a carved pit, torches flickering in the wind. Around the edges, mourners stand quiet, their breath clouding in the frigid air, casting their memories into the twilight. Ordinary folk might be laid to rest with humbler rites. A necklace, a carved comb, a bowl of food placed beside them as if death were a long journey for which they must be fed. Their graves dotted the hills and cliffs, wrapped in the mossy silence of time. And then there were the strange rituals. Archaeologists still find them. A woman buried with a sword she may never have used. A man laid among animal bones in patterns we still do not understand. Some graves bear signs of fire, others of stone circles or charred wood, and always the runes. They remain carved into stone all across Scandinavia. Thor bless this grave. Here lies a good man, remember me. Quiet voices from across 1,000 winters. Even the gods themselves were not perfect. Odin, the Allfather, was wise but weary. He sacrificed an eye for knowledge. He hung himself from the world tree for 9 nights to understand the runes. The gods aged, made mistakes, and would one day fall at Ragnarok, the end of all things. But until then, the people believed. Through cold mornings, through the rhythm of the sea, through the hush of snowfall on wooden roofs, the Norse soul was not only fire and war, but reverence. They watched the skies. They traced omens in the frost. And when they spoke of death, it was not with fear, but with calm, ritual acceptance. So now, close your eyes a little heavier. Let the quiet symbols of their world settle in your mind. Let the runes whisper, slow and steady. As the snow deepens outside your imagined longhouse, and the wind whispers against the wooden walls, let us now turn our attention to warmth. Not just the warmth of the fire, but the warmth of food, fellowship, and the flickering quiet of the hearth. Imagine yourself inside a Viking longhouse after night has fallen. The air is smoky, thick, with the scent of wood, ash, and slow-cooked stew. The only light comes from fire pits down the center of the room, their flames dancing against iron pots suspended from wooden beams. The crackle of logs is soft but constant, a rhythm that seems to echo the heartbeat of the household. The hearth was the heart of Viking life, not only as a source of heat and light, but as a place of nourishment and storytelling. Around it, families gathered close. Mothers stirred pots of barley and root vegetables, while children sat cross-legged on fur rugs, their cheeks pink from the cold and the flickering light. The elder of the household might sit quietly, sipping from a wooden cup, his eyes half closed as stories were murmured like prayers. And what did they eat in this time of deep winter? Their diet was shaped by the harsh climate and what they could preserve. In winter, there were no fresh greens, no fruit. Instead, salted meats hung from beams above, pork, fish, or wild game, caught months before and stored with care. Barrels of sour milk and fermented herring stood in corners. Flatbreads made from rye or barley were baked on stones beside the fire, hard and dry but filling. There might be warm stew made with beans, leeks, and whatever root vegetables had survived the cellar frost. The taste was plain, earthy, but comforting. There was no sugar, no spices from far-off lands, just salt, smoke, and thyme. Drinks were modest. Weak ale brewed at home, safer than water. In the wealthier homes, there might be mead, honey wine, served during special gatherings, thick and golden in carved wooden cups. And in these moments of pause, as the bellies were warmed, came stories, softly spoken tales of gods and heroes, of Thor's thunderous battles, of Odin's wanderings, of trickster, Loki, and the fate of the world. But also, quieter tales, family history, old rumors, the dreams seen in last night's sleep. These moments were precious. For outside the walls, life was uncertain. The snow could bury a home in silence. A failed hunt could bring hunger. A sudden illness could take a life before sunrise. But inside, around the fire, there was comfort. Fragile, flickering, but real. Evenings often passed without speaking. Just the sound of fire, the murmur of breath, the slow licking of spoons against clay bowls. The dogs curled up near the warmth. The goats bleated softly from the barn. All else was still, and yet there was no loneliness here, only the presence of others, the closeness of shared survival, the slow bond of those who lived through the same cold, season after season. So imagine yourself now in that circle. Let the imagined heat of the fire reach you. Let the taste of barley broth settle on your tongue. And let the quiet of this simple, ancient meal lull your thoughts into calm. There is peace in the ordinary. Even in the bitterest cold, the hearth glows. As the fire in the longhouse burns lower and the evening stretches onward, our minds turn toward something quieter still. The thoughts and beliefs that lived in the hearts of those who survived long Viking winters. Religion, for the Norse, was not a separate part of life. It was woven into the very air they breathed, into the rhythm of every day and the silence of every snow-covered night. Imagine lying on a straw mattress, wrapped in fur, with frost lining the edges of the wooden beams overhead. Your breath visible, the world hushed, and in that stillness you think not of tomorrow, but of the gods who walk unseen. The Norse pantheon was full of powerful, flawed, and fascinating beings. Odin, the wise wanderer, one-eyed and always seeking knowledge, sacrificing much for wisdom. Thor, strong and bold, whose hammer guarded both gods and humans from chaos. Freya, goddess of love and war, who rode a chariot drawn by cats. And Loki, the trickster, whose mischief shaped destinies for better or worse. But during the long winter months, belief took on an even deeper presence. In the dark, quiet weeks surrounding the winter solstice, the Norse performed rituals to mark the turning of the sun. They lit fires, not only to warm the body, but to signal hope, to push back the darkness, and to remind themselves that light would return. You might imagine a family gathering outside, bundled in cloaks, lighting a small fire in the snow-covered yard. They speak few words, but each flame has meaning. It is not only warmth, it is protection, a shield against unseen spirits, a reminder to the gods that they are remembered. Offerings were made, sometimes small, like a carved wooden figure placed on a shelf, or a few drops of mead poured onto the earth. Other times, more elaborate ceremonies were held in sacred groves or beside standing stones. In some villages, the local gothi, or priest, would guide the rituals, soft chanting, the raising of arms to the sky, the gentle placement of offerings in fire or water. The Norse believed that spirits lived all around them, not just gods, but land spirits, house spirits, and ancestral presences. In winter, these beliefs took center stage. Doors were marked with symbols for protection. Bread was left out overnight for the Nisser, the household spirits, to avoid mischief. Every creak in the wood, every howl of the wind, every shift in the snow might be seen not just as nature, but as a whisper from beyond. Death was not feared, exactly. It was expected. Valhalla was a reward for warriors, but others might go to hell, a quiet underworld, ruled not with fire, but with stillness. The cold land of the dead was not punishment, it was simply another path. Stories told in winter often dealt with these other worlds, of journeys across frostbitten lands, of ravens that spoke, of dreams that warned of coming hardship, and in every story a quiet thread that the world was vast, mysterious, and filled with unseen eyes. These beliefs, spoken in low tones over flickering firelight, were comforting in their own way. They reminded each listener that they were not alone, not even in the silent hours of the night. As the longhouse drifts into sleep once more, the fire reduced to embers, and the cold presses in at the edges, those beliefs settle like a blanket, not loud, not urgent, but steady, familiar, present. And as you listen now, in your own quiet place, perhaps you feel some of that too. The comfort of ritual, the stillness of winter, the gentle echo of ancient faith. Let it settle with you as we drift onward into deeper night. The night in the Viking Longhouse is long, longer than modern minds might easily imagine. Without electric lights or modern distractions, darkness fell early and stayed until well after breakfast. But within the flickering glow of the hearth, the Vikings found ways to fill these hours, not with noise, but with the quiet comforts of sound. Imagine the longhouse again. The fire has been stoked, and its warmth spreads softly. The air still smells of burning wood and wool. The children are gathered, huddled under furs, and the adults begin to settle into the gentle rhythms of evening, an unhurried time filled not with labor but with listening. In the Norse world, stories were everything. They preserved history, passed down beliefs, taught morals, and perhaps most importantly, gave warmth to cold nights. A skald, the Norse storyteller and poet, might begin with a familiar line. His voice is low, steady, and rhythmic, blending with the crackle of fire. He doesn't speak quickly. He takes his time. His tale might be of Odin, hanging from the world tree, sacrificing himself to gain wisdom, or of a brave warrior who challenged fate itself and sailed into a storm because the gods told him to. Or perhaps something closer to home, a tale of a clever farmer who outwitted trolls in the snowy woods, using nothing but dried fish and a broken lantern. The children listen with wide eyes. The adults nod, sometimes adding a line or correcting a detail. The stories are living things, shared and shaped by memory and voice. There are no books here. Everything is remembered. When the stories wind down, the longhouse does not fall silent. Music often follows. Not loud, orchestrated music, but soft melodies from simple instruments. The lyre, with its few strings, might be gently plucked by a weathered hand. A flute, carved from bone or wood, breathes out slow, wandering notes. These were not performances in the modern sense. No applause, no spotlight, just sound for the sake of passing time. Sound to fill the spaces between thoughts. The kind of sound that hums in your bones and slows your breath. Sometimes the music fades into humming, low and slow, a lullaby, not for children alone, but for everyone who worked hard through the frozen daylight and now simply wanted to rest. Even the crackling fire was part of the music. The occasional pop of a log splitting, the shifting of coals. These were part of the winter soundscape. So too were the distant howls of wolves, muffled through walls, thick with timber and fur, reminding all within that while the world was cold and dangerous, they were safe. For now, in this space of warmth and sound, you might hear the quiet scraping of someone carving wood, the occasional laugh, the rustle of straw as someone shifts under a blanket, and through it all, the constant heartbeat of the hearth. Now, imagine yourself there, wrapped in wool, lulled by the music, soothed by the stories. You don't need to follow every word, just feel the rhythm, let it carry you. This is the way they endured winter, not by pushing through, but by settling into it. Let your breathing slow, let your thoughts drift, like smoke rising toward the rafters. And as the longhouse grows quieter, we will drift now into another layer of Viking winter life. The practical and precious tools of survival that rarely get spoken of, but were always close at hand. As the fire hums low and the night deepens, your gaze might drift across the Viking longhouse. In the dim firelight, objects lie in quiet piles or hang from wooden beams, tools that seem humble, even forgettable. But in this world, where survival was earned day by day, these tools were the difference between comfort and cold, between hunger and a full belly. Let's look more closely. Near the door, tucked beside a pair of worn leather boots, is a simple iron axe. The handle is darkened from years of use, its blade dull but strong. This wasn't a weapon, not tonight. It was for firewood. Every log that now crackles in the hearth was once split by this very tool, its edge bit through frozen wood at dawn, so that the family could sit in warmth at dusk. Above it, hanging from a peg, is a bundle of dried herbs. Their scent is faint but comforting. Thyme, angelica, perhaps a bit of mugwort. Some were used to flavor stews, others brewed into teas to ward off illness. In winter, they were precious, grown months ago and dried carefully in the short warmth of summer. They hang here like memories of greener times. In a corner, wrapped in a rough wool cloth, lies a spindle and distaff. To the untrained eye, it looks like a stick and some fluff, but this is the heartbeat of warmth itself. Women, young and old, spun wool through endless hours of winter, twisting thread by hand, their motions smooth and repetitive. This thread would become cloaks, mittens, trousers, layers that stood between skin and snow. On a shelf made of flat stones, you spot a carved wooden bowl and spoon, both blackened from age and soot. Meals were simple: thick barley porridge, maybe a few pieces of salted fish or root vegetables. A pot hangs above the fire now, suspended by an iron hook. You can smell something starchy and warm. Nothing extravagant, just something to fill the belly and calm the body. There's a skin pouch by the wall, its shape soft and irregular. It might contain salt, more precious than silver in some households. Or maybe dried berries, picked during the last burst of autumn. These were rationed carefully, the taste of summer saved for the coldest days. Not far from the sleeping area, a wooden loom stands in half shadow. Its frame is roughly built, but the threads are taut and orderly. A woolen tunic, half finished, waits in silence. No one weaves tonight. It is a task for daylight, when hands are steady. But its presence speaks volumes of labor, of planning, of care, passed from generation to generation. And hanging beside the fire pit, barely catching the light, is a simple pendant, perhaps Thor's hammer or a protective rune carved into bone. It offers no physical warmth, no food, no light, but it offers hope, tradition, identity. These things, too, are tools of survival. Invisible, but necessary. As your thoughts soften and drift, notice how everything in this space has a place, a purpose, a memory. In modern life, you might overlook such things, but here, in the hush of a Viking winter night, let yourself imagine the feeling of cold iron in your palm, the scratch of wool against your neck, the scent of old wood. All of these things so ordinary yet vital, make up the texture of a life once lived. Now, as sleep presses more gently on your thoughts, let us continue to another space within the Viking world. The quiet rituals of belief that gave these nights even deeper meaning. As the fire's glow dances gently on the timber walls, casting soft, flickering shadows, your thoughts might begin to settle deeper, not just into the warmth of the longhouse, but into the beliefs that filled its silence. In the Viking world, the night was not just darkness. It was a time of spirits, of unseen watchers, of rituals both humble and profound. Imagine yourself in the longhouse as the evening quiets, the voices lower to whispers. A child wraps herself tighter in her wool blanket. The oldest member of the household, a grandmother with gray-streaked braids and a voice like dried leaves, leans forward. She draws a simple rune in the ash near the hearth. It's a protective charm, not written for others to see, but for the spirits who move through the smoke. The hearth was sacred. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was a living being, a bridge between worlds. To extinguish it without care, or to let it die overnight, was almost unthinkable. Many homes whispered blessings into the flames before sleep, asking for protection through the long hours of winter's dark. Above the fire pit, herbs weren't hung only for cooking. Some were bundles of juniper or rohan, meant to ward off bad luck. Tied with red thread, they swayed softly in the updraft, casting faint herbal scent into the stillness. A small carved idol, perhaps of Thor or Freya, sat at the edge of the mantle, soot-darkened but clearly treasured. Offerings of grain or a drop of mead were left at its feet, a silent exchange, thanks for safety, a plea for continued health. Outside, the snow gathers heavy on the thatched roof, and somewhere deep in the night, an owl calls. The Vikings believed in land spirits, the hidden folk, and many would have whispered quiet words to the darkness before stepping out. You never know who might be listening. Better to show respect. Now, imagine a midwinter ritual in the darkest part of the year, when the sun lingered barely above the horizon. Families gathered to honor their ancestors. They told stories by firelight, lit candles or torches, and shared memories of those who had gone before. These were not mournful moments, but soft, thoughtful ones. To remember the dead was to keep the living strong. Even the architecture of the longhouse reflected these beliefs. Roof beams were often carved with knotwork or symbols meant to channel luck or keep evil at bay. In some houses, a small animal bone might be hidden in the rafters, not forgotten but placed with purpose. Everything had meaning, even silence. Dreams, too, were considered messages. A good dream might signal health or harvest. A nightmare could warn of trouble. So, in these final moments before sleep, many Viking families said a few words aloud. A charm, a wish, a name spoken to no one in particular. As your own thoughts drift now, as your breathing slows, let yourself imagine the peace of such ritual. Not dramatic, not grand, but comforting, ancient. A candle flickers, the fire cracks softly. Somewhere in the timbers above, a blessing carved by a hand, long gone still, watches over the room. The people here do not fear the dark. They live with it, within it, and their rituals are small lights, enough to carry them through winter nights like this one. Let us now step quietly beyond the hearth, into the rhythms of rest, and how the Vikings prepared for the long, cold sleep of night. The longhouse is still now, the earlier rustles of movement, a child shuffling into a blanket, The soft scrape of a wooden bowl, the sigh of someone settling into their straw bedding, have faded into a near-perfect quiet. This is the part of the night when time seems to lose its meaning. In the Viking world, sleep was not always taken in one long stretch. In the deep winter, people sometimes slept in two segments, what some called first sleep and second sleep. After a few hours of rest, it was common for someone to wake in the dark silence, sit by the fading fire, tend a log, perhaps say a prayer, or think through the day. Then they would return to slumber. Imagine that now. The flicker of the fire has dimmed to glowing embers. A few soft breaths rise and fall beneath thick wool blankets. Someone, perhaps the elder of the house, gently rises. They toss on a heavy cloak and sit by the hearth, adding a piece of dry birch to the coals. The room fills with the sweet scent of warming wood. Outside, the snow hushes everything. Inside, the shadows deepen and stretch. Sleep was not simply a necessity. It was a space where the body and soul could move freely. In dreams, ancestors visited. Prophecies were whispered. One might wake from a vivid vision and recount it softly to their neighbor before the fire. There was no rush to fall back asleep, no clocks, no alarms, just rhythm, slow, human rhythm. Even the act of sleeping together in one shared space shaped the feeling of Viking nights. Families, and sometimes farmhands or guests, would lie in close proximity, feet pointed toward the fire or tucked into nooks built into the walls. Blankets of fur, wool, and linen were pulled high, noses peeking out into the cool air. The warmth of bodies and fire worked together to push the cold away. The wooden walls creaked as they expanded and contracted with the cold outside. Perhaps a dog nestled near the door stirred in its sleep. The faint sound of breathing from elders, children, kin rose and fell like waves, peaceful, unbroken, above. In the rafters, dried herbs and tools hung motionless. Nothing stirred. Even the mice had found their corners for the night. This was the most sacred part of the day, not because of ceremony, but because of simplicity. The rhythm of sleep was trusted, honored. The Longhouse didn't demand productivity at all hours. It allowed for stillness, for breath, for quiet. Outside, the aurora might have flickered above the snow, unseen by the sleeping household. But even if unseen, it was felt, the world gently turning beyond the thick wooden walls. If someone murmured in their sleep, no one stirred. If a baby whimpered, a mother's arm was already waiting. No one rushed, no one feared the night. They knew it. They knew its rhythm, its silence. You might find yourself breathing slower now too, not because you're told to, but because you are settling into that rhythm, that Viking rhythm. The gentle pulse of sleep in the deep fire-warmed dark. Soon, we'll rise again with them, but not yet. There is still one final segment to explore, the first morning light. The fire is little more than a red-orange thread now, gently pulsing beneath a soft shell of ash. Outside the Longhouse, the black sky is beginning to lift at the edges, the kind of soft light that doesn't break the dark but nudges it steadily. The stars blink slower, fainter. The snow, resting in thick layers on the roof and piled against the walls, begins to reflect the faintest hint of morning. Inside, it's still quiet, but not silent. A soft yawn, the shuffle of thick wool as someone stretches, a low cough from the back of the hall, someone rustling under their fur blanket. It's not yet time to rise fully, but the Longhouse knows. Light is returning. The first to rise is often the matron of the home, or perhaps an elder. She checks the fire, stirring it gently with a carved stick and placing a small log onto the coals. It crackles softly. The scent of smoke and wood begins to lift again, not sharp, but familiar, comforting. A child, still groggy, peers up and turns into their blanket once more. The animals begin to shift. A soft grunt from the cow. The hens cluck faintly from their perch. The dog lifts its head and pads quietly toward the fire. Breakfast won't be extravagant. Warm porridge made from grains, sometimes a bit of dried fruit or meat. Water warmed over the hearth. Wooden bowls passed quietly, hand to hand. There is no talking at first. The Longhouse is no longer a place of sleep alone. With morning comes life again, the pulse of work, of tasks waiting. Someone will mend a boot, someone else will fetch snow to melt. The hearth must be tended all day to keep the room livable. Outside, the paths between buildings must be cleared, even just enough to reach the woodpile. But there is no hurry. In this life, morning doesn't start with alarm bells or blaring lights. It begins with the body, the warmth of shared space, the rise of breath, and the return of the sun. The light slips through the small opening in the roof. It lands softly on the packed dirt floor, catching the edge of a wooden bowl, a sleeping face, a bundle of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. And now you too may feel it, that pull toward the warmth, toward movement, but not yet rushing. The knowledge that the world begins again each day, softly, in small ways. Perhaps you're still resting, half asleep, gently listening. Perhaps your eyes have closed. That's all right. The fire, the breath of the room, the rhythm of sleep and waking, the softness of the snow outside, the warmth of human closeness, bound by wood, wool, and time. In a moment, we will leave this place, but for now, rest here a little longer. Let the fire burn low, let the snow fall. You are part of this story now, and it will wait with you until the next dream begins. Good night, or perhaps good morning.